One of the things that I've seen time and time again is students understand the process of dimensional analysis. However, they constantly get wrong answers because they don't know how to use their calculators. So just re-emphasizing here that it's vital that you are able to do a calculation as complicated as this using your calculator correctly. Keep in mind all the numbers that are in the numerators, the top of the fractions, have to get multiplied. All the numbers in the bottom of the fractions, the denominators, have to be divided. Obviously, multiplying by 1, dividing by 1, you don't have to worry about those. There's a few common mistakes. One mistake is to separate the numerator and the denominator when you're doing these calculations. In other words, what people will do is they'll multiply all the tops of the fractions and then they'll write that number down. And then they'll multiply all the denominators of the fractions, the bottom, and then they write that number down. Then they re-enter those numbers. So there's a lot of chance for error, number one, and it's a lot of extra time doing it that way. Instead of doing it that way, what you should do is put all the numbers in your calculator from left to right. Multiplying by 1 or dividing by 1 does not change the answer. So you don't have to worry about doing those. So for a calculation like this one, these are the steps that you would enter. Notice I'm just working from left to right, so the first calculation that I hit after putting in the original number, 3.62 times 10 to the fourth, the 8 is in the denominator, so that's going to get divided. Then I'm going to multiply by 1 times 10 to the 12th in the top, and then I'm going to divide by this number in the bottom. And I'm going to continue that from left to right. So those keystrokes look like this. If you do this, notice this is the negative sign. Some calculators look like this. Other calculator, this is not a subtraction sign. So you can't use the subtraction button. Some calculators, remember, will have a button that looks like this, plus or minus, to make it a negative. So I'm not putting in parentheses. This is one button on some calculators that have this format. I'm not using parentheses. You may have learned to use the parentheses on your calculator, but that is, again, time consuming and it can often give you the wrong answer. Some calculators, remember this EE button, will look like EXP, or it might be something similar to this. But it's taking the place of the time sign and the 10 in the scientific notation. So emphasizing this point twice for some reason, but parentheses are not needed. And notice the equal sign here was pressed only one time. You should be able to do a calculation like this and just hit the equal sign once to get the answers. If you leave your calculator in scientific mode, then you won't have to do the extra step of turning your answer into scientific notation. So if you do all this, let's see what the answer should be. So going back here, when I put all this in, before I do any rounding where I'm worried about sig figs, the answer you should get is 1.254335 times 10 to the 18th. Now, this also applies to problems we're going to see a little bit later on where you don't have the questions in the same format. So you just have a calculation like this. So let's say you're doing 0.989 and then 1.50. So those are the numbers in the numerator. And in the denominator you have 0.0821 and 314.8. So if you were doing this calculation, the same rules still apply. Anything that's in the top gets multiplied. Anything that's in the bottom gets divided. Even though technically you are multiplying these two numbers together, but remember, the way we want to put the answers in is we want to put in the answer from the top, then divide by this, then multiply by this answer, this number in the top, and then divide by this number in the bottom. So doing this, if you put in your calculator a time sign between these 0.0821 and the 314.8 number, you're not going to get the correct answer. In normal notation, this is going to be 0.0573997. So practice problems like this. If you're not getting the correct answers, double check that you know how to enter the digits in your calculator.